We had a big drawdown today. The fund's down around 11%, driven by Tesla. The news is supposedly that there's a delay in the robotaxi event, and the stock sold off right away, actually more than 10% because it was up 2% and then ended up down 8%. Also, Uber's up about 7%, same exact timing. Stock was down and then shot up when this news hit the tape. So clearly, this must have been the reason, something related to robotaxi. We want to discuss this here in this episode, and from a couple of angles. We want to use this opportunity also to clarify one thing. It's part of our strategy at Orange Capital Partners not to obsess about short-term moves or just generally short-term volatility, stock moves, things along those lines. So having said that, of course, you might say, well, I mean, you're just doing that right now. You're discussing a stock move that could or might not be relevant. But that's exactly the point, right? There's a difference between obsessing about short-term stuff and dissecting the signal from the noise. The purpose of this podcast is to give people a sense of what it feels like to run a hedge fund. At Orange Capital Partners, we're very focused on the long term. And we're also focused on the things that don't change instead of obsessing with uncertainty and volatility. However, of course, we have to also pay attention to what's happening, whether that is on a daily basis, weekly or monthly basis. That's not up to us. That's up to the news flow. But there is news that matters. And it's our job to understand that. The more we understand about the company, the more knowledge we have about the company, the better we can explain what's going on, the better we can understand the signal from the noise. This is not even wrong podcast. It's July 11, 2024. This is Krim Delco. For the day, the fund is down 11%. The market is flat. For the year, we are up 19.8%. The market is up 17.7%. We're outperforming by 2.1%. The news is that Tesla is delaying the robotaxi event. Now, let's talk about this. And let's first start with the most important question. What is the robotaxi event? What does that actually mean? And I bet you can ask 10 people what robotaxi event means. 10, Tesla investors, institutional investors, people in the know. And you'll get 10 different answers. And that's partly on Tesla, but that's also how the company actually operates. Because they are not, pinning themselves down to very precise definitions of what the near future will look like. And partly that's because they also don't know it themselves. I think they are in the business of iterating continuously, of trying to, bring up new solutions to problems. As they do this, new problems show up. They work on solutions. This is a rapid iteration company. In our opinion, the most important factor, the most important competitive advantage of Tesla. So because of that, it is understandable that Tesla also is reluctant to let themselves pin down on very specific, okay, this is what we're going to do in 3 months, and this is exactly what's going to happen in 3 months. In fact, if they did that, we would be disappointed, which means that already 3 months ago, they knew what they're going to discuss, and maybe new things happen, particularly when it comes to AI. So having said that, now, what does robotaxi event actually mean for us? It means, number one, of course, they're going to talk about a way to hire autonomous cars for transportation. They already hinted that that's going to look something like a mix between Uber and Airbnb. So some of it will be a fleet managed by a third party, whether it's Tesla or not, doesn't matter, but some sort of fleet managed. And some of that fleet will be owned by the users, and some of that fleet will be owned by third parties, and some of that will be owned by Tesla. This is kind of where we live right now. And it's, of course, interesting to hear from them what they expect. I think robotaxi event means a little bit more than that. It also means giving us some understanding of where we stand with autonomy. Okay, what can we expect in general from an autonomous vehicle, Tesla vehicle? How far are we in autonomy? We already are using, FSD 12, so we have a good sense for that, but we could we could hear some things about regulatory aspects of it. We are very curious about China. China, we believe, could be a Sputnik effect because the regulator in the United States is reluctant to drive FSD for reasons of competitive protection of legacy auto. But we believe that there could be a Sputnik effect from China. In other words, if China pushes for autonomy and robotaxi, then the US will follow suit. Lastly, we believe it's also important to talk about the financing and the financials and the expectations of revenue and all of those things that could be embedded in a presentation. I think robotaxi event is, the way we understand it, is very similar to the AI event, AI 2 event, and the battery day. It's a long-term perspective by Tesla to give us a sense for how we should think about this new type of business. This is not just a new business line for Tesla. It's not like Tesla decided to enter a new market and compete. They're creating a new world, not just a new market, a world of transport on demand. We are interested in also the technology aspects and the engineering aspects of this. If you want to have a car that has 5x in utility in terms of usage, then I want to understand, how are you going to service that car? How long is that car going to last? Do you have engineering solutions that will give me confidence that my car, or any car for that matter, actually can last this long? And if so, can I count on a reduction of dollars per mile, which is really what this is all about, as we said several times before, that it's all about dollars per mile, right? What you want is, you want to minimize dollars per mile or maximize mile per dollar, same thing. So robotaxi means, what's your solution here? Can we expect a car to have 5x usage with the same or even less cost? What's the service network going to look like? How is the maintenance going to look like? The cleaning, are you going to have a cleaning solution? So these are all interesting questions. Lastly, I want to say, what we also would like to know as owners of a Tesla is, can we expect some autonomy products, what we call native FSD products? So for example, my car can go pick me up while I'm at work, or I can send the car to pick up my wife from the airport. Like things like that would be very interesting to hear where we stand in terms of the regulatory framework and also the technological framework. So robotaxi event means a lot of things. Now, having summarized that, now what does it mean to delay that event, right? I mean, you could look at this, I would say, like everything, we have to argue in spectra here, right? So on the one hand, this could be just a delay, which is of course irrelevant. A few weeks sooner or later makes absolutely no difference. Or the other side of the spectrum is, the delay means something is really wrong. Either the company is not ready, or they might change or pivot. We've been there before. We've had rumors about the Model 2 being scrapped, and then Musk made comments, and on the earnings call they made another comment, and it just wasn't very clear where this whole thing was going to go, and then of course it got sort of nobody's talking about this anymore now, but still, I mean, we've been there before. We've had problems, rumors, all that kind of stuff. So people are wary of that. I don't think it's a good thing to have these things. But again, with a company like Tesla that is iterating all the time, these things will happen. This is not a bug. This is a feature of the company. Because you iterate so fast, you come up with new things all the time. Some of those things will be scrapped. Some of those things will be delayed. Some of those things will be pivoted into other things. This is just how companies like Tesla not just work. This is how it's supposed to be. There's no other way. I mean, if this was more deterministic, it wouldn't be interesting. And that reflects the volatility of the stock. And there's a legitimate argument to be made about the Sharpe ratio of Tesla and if it's even worth investing in the stock, particularly since we have companies like ASML or Microsoft or Qualcomm, maybe even we have Amazon, Google, Google less so, but there's companies that have very good momentum, even Nvidia, if you will. They have very good momentum and they're a lot more steady. Yes, the stocks are also quite volatile, but not to the extent of Tesla. And in the case of Nvidia, they've done so well, so extremely well, that you can argue it's still a massive Sharpe ratio no matter what. So now with all of this said, we believe that with Tesla, the expected return is so massive that we think that the Sharpe ratio is warranted. But that is because it's expected, it's in the future. It's not something that we can pin down. It's something that we have to say it's expected. We believe. It's not a fact. And that's part of our job, is to be able to withstand days like today or rumor mills like maybe we'll have in the next few days about Tesla and the robotaxi day and all of these things. Let's also put in context the recent story of the stock. We had a 50% upside correction in the stock within 2 weeks. So there's some of that given up today. We might give up some more. I think that's okay. That's how things trade. People, drive it up, short covering, front running of short covering, buying, outright buying, and then there's the inevitable getting out of stuff, or maybe even shorting or whatnot. Now, we really hope for the sake of the market, not so much for us, but for the sake of the market, that this whole thing was real, that this wasn't a hit piece and some shorts just got took advantage of the market. I mean, this would be horrible. Given the amount of stock that was traded in the high volumes, actually, this definitely feels real. Also, the Uber reaction gives us a little bit more confidence, although you could say that's just a corollary of the whole news situation here. So to summarize this delay, again, it's a spectrum from non-event to maybe a little bit more serious. Maybe actually before we summarize, we do want to discuss a little bit the risk of autonomy as a whole. And we're going to talk about the business risk, not the technology risk. And the business risk is, number one, of course, is it monetizable? Number two, if so, is Tesla going to pick the right path? There is a possibility that you have the right technology, that you're a first mover, and that you pick the wrong way to monetize something, and then you kind of fall back. And some people might actually regret having done some things early on, let's say in the internet space with advertising, and that came back to bite them. So business models matter, and those are risks that we shouldn't take lightly. And also, quite frankly, there's not too much evidence that Tesla has expertise in applying business models to their products and services at the right time, at the right way all the time. They make mistakes. In fact, I believe with FSD, actually, that's an open question whether that was a mistake or not, because you could argue that FSD was overpriced, but it was overpriced because they just didn't want too many people to adopt it in the early days. I think, finally, again, we want to emphasize the standalone native opportunity of FSD. That's very important. FSD is not just a robotaxi situation. FSD is also a product and service that can be sold to existing Tesla customers, that can be used to leverage Tesla sales. So it could be an addition, a margin expansion opportunity. It might have an impact on the stock valuation, and that's fair. Maybe a robotaxi situation in the long run is a lot more profitable than just selling software on top of a car, but that's not so clear. I would say that there's a good argument to be made that autonomy whether it's through a robotaxi fleet or whether it's just autonomy on its own, can be a massive, massive revenue generator for Tesla. So to summarize again, the delay of the robotaxi event in itself is an interesting discussion point. That's why we picked it in this episode. We discussed what robotaxi actually means for us. It encompasses several things, not just the robotaxi business model and the launch, but also what it means, let's say, from an engineering perspective, what kind of cars we should expect, what kind of solutions and problems are to be expected from, coming from this robotaxi angle. We discussed some of the implications of a delay, what that means, and I think we came to the conclusion that with Tesla, there's always going to be delays, and this is part of the company's MO. Delays, by the way, delays, pivots, sometimes they're also early, sometimes they're surprise to the upside. So there's a lot of things, a lot of vectors that drive the Tesla story, and that's why the upside is so great, and that's why we're so excited. Thank you.